Thank you. Or they will say, pick your own title and write your own article. You know? On this particular occasion, I was given the title of the article. The title of the article was to be, How Do You Date a Rock? My first response was, first you have to ask her. Well, the guy's got it. Now, think with me for a moment. Is there anything about a rock that will tell you how old it is? Is there anything about the size, feel, shape, smell, mass, density, chemical composition? Is there anything about a rock that will tell you how old it is? And the answer, of course, is no. There's nothing about a rock that will tell you how old it is. I can go outside right now. I mean, there's plenty of rocks around here, especially over in the newer construction here. And I can pick it up. I can claim any age I want to for it. You might disagree with me, but you cannot scientifically prove I am wrong. Did you hear that? Yep. I can claim any age I want. You may disagree with me, but you cannot scientifically prove that I am wrong. I mean, think about it. When we find rocks, do they come with little white strings, little white tags attached saying, I'm 10 million years old and signed by a scientist who was there at the time? Excuse me? No. Oh. So, how can we determine a way in which to date the Earth and the universe? Now, to start with, let's take a look at a rock we found not long ago. Now, this rock, when we found it, did it have a little white tag, little white string attached to it saying how old it was? No. Well, then how do we know how old it is? Can we determine how old it is? Because what we're looking at tonight is this. Are the Earth and the universe really billions of years old, as evolutionists claim, or are they in fact young? Now, of course, you already know my opinion on this. It's obvious. But let's take a look at some simple, basic evidence to prove that the Earth and the universe are in fact young. Now, you don't have to have a great in-depth knowledge. You just have to remember a few of these things. When somebody says, oh, you don't believe in millions and billions of years, you say, no, I don't. And I've got a few reasons why, and all you have to remember is a few of these. It's one thing about evolutionists. All you have to do is put a speed bump in their road of life to catch their attention. And this is the best way to do it. So let's start off with this. You know, is the Earth old? Did it all start with something called a Big Bang? Now, all of you have heard about that thing called the Big Bang. Is that correct? Yes. Now, let me ask you one simple, logical question. You do not have to know anything about science to answer this question. When was the last time you saw an explosion construct a building? I'm sorry, was that too fast for y'all? I said, when was the last time you saw an explosion construct the building? Never, and you never will, is that right? Because explosions destruct, they do not construct, is that correct? And the whole idea of the Big Bang was only invented about 100 years ago. It was never a good theory to begin with, and it has been scientifically disproven by evolutionists, and if you do not believe me, go to my website. I have an article there, and I quote mostly evolutionists who admit it doesn't work, and they have now abandoned it. But let's think. Did it all start with the Big Bang? Well, no, of course it didn't. But what we're looking at is the universe 13.82 billion years old? That is the current age of the universe according to evolutionists, 13.82. I love emphasizing that, 2. You know, 5 years ago it was 13.7. Now it's 13.82. You see, they constantly change their idea about how old the universe is because the more we can see, the farther we can see, the newer satellites we put up. Hubble found all kinds of things that contradicted evolutionary theory, so then they said, well, apparently it's not all that good a satellite, although it lasted 20 years, and it was a great piece of equipment. I think we should still keep it going. Personally, it's that good. But now they put up the James Webb satellite, and they said, well, this is going to allow us to see further all the way back to the Big Bang. And already they're saying, wait a minute, this thing is finding things that contradict evolution. And I guarantee you, you can write this down. I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet, but you can write this down. I prophesy within the next 2 years they're going to say, oh, it isn't 13.82 billion years old. If they're going to say something like it's 14.6 or 15.3 or something. Because every time we put up a new satellite that can see further, it simply increases the age of the Earth according to their religion. Hello? And it is a religion. Remember that evolution is the basis of atheism, communism, socialism. It is the basis for euthanasia, abortion, homicide, suicide. It's a bad thing. Hello? Even Charles Darwin admitted it was a religion of death. Hello? Well, again, why did I emphasize the two? It's real simple. Do you know why they put the two on the end there? You don't? It's to make it sound like they actually measured it. Yeah. Oh, you guys need more caffeine before you come. But is it, or is it actually only 6,000 years old as the Bible says? I mean, we've got two choices. There is no middle ground, folks. Anybody who thinks of a middle ground is utterly unaccepted by anybody, okay? So, when you tell somebody that you believe in a young earth, young universe, such as if I were talking to somebody, I know what's going to happen. They're going to look and they're going to say, you believe in a young earth, young universe? And then, this is like a knee-jerk reaction. Then they're going to say, but wait. But wait, you can't be serious. Hello? And then they're going to say this, doesn't it have to be old because? Now, depending upon the person you're speaking to, their educational level, their interest in this area of things, experience, etc., depending upon the person, they're going to then give you a litany, a list of why they think it's old. And now I'm going to share a list with you, but I want you to know that if you're talking to an individual, again, based on their experience or knowledge, they may have some of these items, they may have other items and so forth, but they're going to say, doesn't it have to be old because? And they're going to say this, doesn't it have to be old because doesn't it take millions, billions of years for rocks to form? Or, what about diamonds and other gemstones to form? Doesn't that take a long time? Or, how about stalactites and stalagmites? Doesn't that take millions of years? What about the polar ice caps to form? Currently, evolutionists would claim that the polar ice caps are at least 2 to 3 million years old, and they would say we've had multiple ice ages, which is not true, and they're going to say that those ice ages have come and gone over millions and millions of years. By the way, we're going to take a look at that tonight. Then they'll say, well, what about thousands of feet of sedimentary layers to form in the ground? And remember, sedimentary rock is just layers of dried out mud. It requires flooding. Hint. What about deep canyons to be cut into rock layers? What about dinosaur fossils to form? Now, I mentioned that I grew up on the campus of the University of California, Berkeley, but it's much worse than that. When I was not being taught evolution in elementary school in Berkeley, and that's all they taught me in the 1950s, I used to go over to the paleontology laboratories of the University of California, Berkeley, because I grew up on the campus. The reason was my father earned his degrees there. He became a teaching professor there, and at one time a secretary to the president. And I would go over to the paleontology laboratories when I was only elementary school. And I would immerse myself on fossils, dinosaurs, evolutionary theory, being taught by PhDs in the lab when I was only in elementary school. I learned about these things so well that by the time I hit the 3rd grade, they were already borrowing me from one classroom to the other in the California public school system, and I was teaching the other children about dinosaurs, fossils, and evolutionary theory because I knew more about it than the teachers did. Hello? That's a true story, folks. And when you were in school, they taught you about dinosaur fossils. Didn't they say it takes millions of years for a dinosaur fossil to form? Is that correct? We'll look at that. What about, again, of course, coal to form? Now, evolution will tell you that most of the coal, not all, but most of the coal on the Earth today formed during the Carboniferous period, supposedly 300 to 360 million supposed years ago. And we're going to take a look at that. And then, of course, what about, well, fossilized wood, the fossilized forests of the world? Again, the same thing, just like the dinosaur fossils. They say, oh, that takes a long time, millions of years, right? Now, depending upon the person you talk to, again, their experience, knowledge, and so forth, Their list may be shorter, longer. It may contain some of these items and others, right? But almost to the person that you talk to, whether they have these or others, almost every one of them will say, what about? Doesn't it take millions and billions of years for light to reach us from distant stars and distant galaxies? And the answer to that is no. And we're going to take a look at that tonight too. Because you see, obviously, I said all is young, and it has to be young because. Now, I have 2 full-length presentations on videos out there. How Do You Date a Rock is the other one. You might have guessed that title. Tonight is Why I Believe in a Young Creation. But we also have books out there, free articles on my website. I seriously believe that this is the single most important subject scientifically when it comes to the acceptance of creation or evolution, the issue of time. Think with me for a moment. Evolutionists do not have one single scientific proof it's old. They have 5 arguments they use to deceive you into believing it's old, but they don't have one proof. Today we have over 400 scientific demonstrations that it is, in fact, young. I mentioned the word geochronometer yesterday, Earth time clock or universe time clock. I do want to explain to you something. A geochronometer does not tell you how young something is. A geochronometer tells you how old it could be, but no more. So it can be up to this old, but no more, and it can be anything less. Did you hear that? So a geochronometer doesn't tell you how young it is. A geochronometer says it could be up to this old based on a particular criteria, but no more. But it can be anything less, and that makes it consistent with 6,000. And in this particular presentation, I'd like to start off with something that appeals to the ladies. There have been many wonderful women scientists, and so ladies, I am here to help you tonight. Are you here, ladies? Ladies? Come on, ladies, I'm here to help you. Are you here tonight? Because I'm expecting a lot of support from you. Now, ladies, please tell me, how many of you like the bling? Apparently you're not familiar with modern slang. Bling is the sparkling gemstones. That's the bling. So, how many of you ladies like the bling? Come on, ladies, I'm here to help you. Oh, thank you. Finally. Well, you see, let's start off with gemstones. This is a natural piece of opal mined by hand in Australia. I think you'll agree that is a right purty rock. Is that correct? Come on, that's purty. Yes. Right? Thank you. He does good work, doesn't he? But this is a natural opal mined by hand in Australia. This, however, is not a man-made opal. This is a man-grown opal. Understand the difference. You see, this opal was not made. This opal was grown in that bottle right there. Do I have your attention? You see, what we're looking at is, does it take millions of years for gemstones like opals and diamonds to form? And we're also going to take gold. Goodness only knows you hear a lot about gold these days, right? Radio, TV, you know. And so, let's look. This is another natural opal from Australia, mined by hand. This is a man-grown opal. It was grown in that jar. You can see it growing in the lens right there, and it only took 3 months. Hello? Any ladies here have opal jewelry? Anybody here have opal jewelry? 3 hands raised. First of all, I want you to know that they're real, natural. This was done as an experiment by a Christian creation-believing scientist. He does not mass-produce them and sell them on the market. But think with me. If you take the right chemicals, simply put them in a bottle, let them sit there for 3 months, you can grow your own opal. Men, were you listening? Well, I'm going to let you read the article. I don't give away the formula. And apparently opals are just not your thing. How about that stone? Come on, ladies, that's a right nice rock. Come on, ladies, that's the world's largest blue diamond. It's the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. That's the Hope Diamond. That is a nice rock. And of course, again, evolutionists will tell you it takes millions of years to get a diamond in the ground. It takes millions of years for them to actually work their way up to the top and so forth. And that's one of the things they tell you at the jewelry store when they romance the stone. That's what they call it. They romance. You come in and they show you these sparkling things, the bling, you know. And this diamond, oh, why am I paying so much for it? Well, you see, it's 10 million years old. And you go, ooh, and you fork over the money. Hello? Now, let's think about, yeah, there you are. Careful, they think you're a shill. But I want you to think about it. That's what evolutionists claim. It takes millions of years for diamonds to form high temperatures, high pressures in the ground, working their way to the surface, typically through volcanic vents. But is that true? Well, first of all, if you simply stop and thought about it right here, right now, you already know that's not true. Because you know that since 1953, we've been able to make man-made diamonds. Now, these are not gem quality diamonds, they're industrial grade diamonds, but they are real diamonds, and we've been able to make them since 1953. When you see people taking stones and cutting through concrete or asphalt, they're using stones that are covered with man-made diamonds. And so it doesn't take millions of years, does it? Now, I mean, I understand that, of course, this is done industrially and so forth, but it doesn't take millions of years. We make them quite readily. Is that right? But how many of you know that in the year 2003, we made gem quality diamonds in a matter of minutes? It doesn't take millions of years. But the problem here is in 2003, it took tremendous pressure and tremendously high temperatures. That's centigrade, not Fahrenheit, so you can roughly double the temperature. But please notice, that comes from Nature magazine, the single highest scientific journal in the world for evolutionists. Again, I'm not afraid to quote evolutionists. They often find things that prove creation. I love it. And it's their money. I love that too. But in 2003, we found out how to make gem quality diamonds in only a matter of minutes. But let's think. If you know anything about a scientist, you know that once we learn how to do something, the next two questions are, how do you do it faster, cheaper, or both? Hello? The very next year, in 2004, we started making pure gem quality diamonds in only 12 hours at far lower temperatures and lower pressures. This was published in New Scientist, which is a totally evolutionary publication. As a matter of fact, it's vitriolic, really. But we made man-made pure diamonds in only 12 hours. But of course, if you know anything about a scientist, you know that once we learn how to do something, the next two questions are, how do you do it cheaper, faster, or both? Is that correct? In 2006, we started making up to 10-carat diamonds in only 24 hours. This is published in a publication associated with Nature magazine. And so today, but remember, ladies, I'm here to help you, right? Ladies, right? Today, not here necessarily in this town, but you can just drive over to Nashville right now. You can find a jewelry shop, and you now have you have a choice. You can buy a natural diamond or a man-made diamond, but the man-made diamond will be 15 to 50% cheaper. Men, were you listening? But I would not leave you guys hanging. I have something for the men now. Notice, if you would, please. In the year 2015, we found how to make small diamonds without pressure and using an oxyacetylene torch, the kind you use in a body shop, and it only took 8 hours. Men, were you listening? Men, you better be listening, because I know the women were. Hello? And now let's talk about gold. Again, you hear an awful lot about gold, right? Now, I want to assure you, I never, ever ask a trick question. Did you hear that? I never ask a trick question. I'm going to ask you a serious question. I would like to get a serious answer. How many of you would like to be worth $1 billion tomorrow? Apparently not. I'll ask again. How many of you would like to be worth $1 billion tomorrow? And the next day you will tithe to the church, correct? Pastor says he'll even come and collect it for you. Well, I was absolutely serious about this, and I'm absolutely serious when I tell you how to do it, and I am serious. If you will raise a child, grandchild, great-grandchild, that can figure out how to get the gold out of seawater, you will be worth $1 billion the next day. There's enough gold dissolved in the oceans of the world to make everyone in this room $1 billion and more. The problem is nobody's ever figured how to get it out. Hello? Now, in the presentation as it was recorded in the video that we have out in the back, I have an example. It has been discovered back in the 1980s that the massive gold deposit at Papua New Guinea could have formed in as little as 5 hours. However, I've updated this now tonight for you, and I want you to know, today we now know that gold deposits form in the ground instantaneously. And earthquakes cause gold deposits. You see, gold is not only dissolved in the Earth's oceans, it's also dissolved in groundwater. And it's dissolved in groundwater, and when there's an earthquake, two pieces of land slip against each other, causes a lot of heat and friction, and it evaporates the water and will leave behind gold seams. Hello? Yeah. Doesn't take a long time to get gold after all. And let's talk about stalactites and stalagmites. Now, of course, we're here in Tennessee and very close to the ones up in Kentucky here and so forth, but I'm sure in school you went to at least one cave or another, right? Someplace. And again, it might have been Luray, Virginia, Mammoth, Kentucky, Carlsbad Caverns, New Mexico, whatever, but you went to a cave system, right? They're even in northern Alabama. And when you went to those caves, the guide would lead you up to the entrance of the cave, and wouldn't they say two things to you? The first thing they would say, you know, it takes 10, 20 million years to get a cave like this. Come on, the correct response there was, ooh. Okay? So I'm going to give you a second chance. You know, it takes 10, 20 million years to get a cave like this. Much better. The second thing they tell you is, don't touch that. It'll take 1,000 years to grow back. I think some of you have heard this. Yes. Well, let's just take a look. Does it really take 10, 20 million years to get a limestone cave? If you touch it, does it really take 1,000 years to grow back? Now, I have pictures from all over the world. I'm just going to show you two examples tonight, because that's not what this is all about. First of all, do stalactites and stalagmites grow slowly as evolutionists claim? This is the photograph of a cave in the Yucatan Peninsula. The Yucatan is honeycombed with limestone caves. And in this photograph, you will notice two pieces of ancient Mayan pottery. Now, this pottery has been dated as being about 1,300 years old. But I wonder if you happen to notice on top of this man-made pottery, there is a stalagmite. Is that correct? And that stalagmite only took about 1,300 years to grow. Is that correct? So first of all, does it take millions of years to get a limestone cave? Come on, folks, you really have to respond with the correct answer. The correct answer is not a chance. Okay? Now let me give you a second example. This comes from Australia. Here you see a man-made cave. Technically, it's a man-made tunnel. But this man-made tunnel was dug in 1857. It's 160 foot long. The photograph you see here was taken in 1997. Here we see beautiful flowstones and curtain stalactites and so forth, and all of this formation occurred in only 140 years. But tell me, does it look like some of the caves you've been in? So, does it take millions of years to get a limestone cave? Not a chance, thank you. And what about the Antarctic ice cap? Now understand, in the Arctic there is no land. It's a fairly thin layer of floating ice in the North Pole. But at the South Pole, we've got a continent. There's so much ice in Antarctica, it literally pushes the continent down. And of course, evolutionists would say, oh, it takes millions of years to get the polar ice cap in Antarctica. But is that true? First of all, I want to introduce you that Russian scientists at what's called the Vostok Hole say in Antarctica that they picked a spot, drilled down, and found 400,000 layers in the ice till they got to the bottom. Now, Vostok in Russian means east or eastern, and so this is the Vostok Eastern Hole. French and Italian consortium have been digging at what's called Dome C, and they say they found 800,000 little lines in the ice, and they say that these little lines are like annual rings in a tree trunk, that each line represents a year. You know how you cut through a tree trunk, you count the rings, right? And when I was an evolutionist, I believed it, I taught it. And so they say, well, in this area the ice is 400,000 years old, in that area it's 800,000 years old. Now, American scientists have drilled through the polar ice cap in Greenland. Do you know what we found under the ice in Greenland? No? Leaf litter and dead insects. Greenland used to be green. Hello? Now, let's take a look at this idea that those little lines in the ice represent years just like tree rings, okay? Now, first of all, when they say they found 400,000 or 800,000, that's actually not true. What they're doing is the lines do exist in the upper portion of the ice cap. But because of the tremendous pressure of the ice, as you go down into the middle of the ice, it squeezes the lines out. And the rest of it's just extrapolation. So they didn't actually see them. They're just extrapolating them. Are you with me? But, I mean, think with me. You've all opened up the refrigerator freezer and you've seen two ice cubes melting together in the freezer, right? Because ice sublimes. And so, well, in the bottom, it squeezes the lines out and you can't even see them. However, how do I know that those lines are not individual years, like tree rings? Well, I'm going to ask all of you to come back in your mind with me because I'm looking here and I don't think we have anybody that actually remembers as an adult 1942. Maybe we do. But come back with me to the year 1942. During World War II, there were 6 Lockheed, as you see here, fighters, and 2 Boeing B-17 bombers, and they were going to go to England to be a part of the war effort in 1942. But the problem is they can't fly directly from the U.S. to England. It's too far. And we didn't have mid-air refueling in those days. And so if you can't fly directly across the Atlantic, what must you do? If you cannot fly directly across the Atlantic, you must fly around the Atlantic. And how do you fly around the Atlantic? Well, it's very simple. You go to Bangor, Maine. You fuel up, you fly up to Labrador, Newfoundland. You then fuel up, fly over to Greenland, fuel up. Then you fly to Iceland, fuel up, and you keep going till you get to England. In 1942, these 8 American fighters, bombers, took off, and they got to Greenland and they fueled up. Then they proceeded to fly over the Arctic ice cap on Greenland, and they were headed to Iceland, but when they got to Iceland, they ran into something called a white-out blizzard. Anybody here familiar with a white-out blizzard? I mean, it does snow here, but you've been further north, you know you can get into snowstorms, you can't see the front end of the car. And that was the situation. And so what happens? They can't land in Iceland. They have to turn back. Problem is they don't have enough fuel to go back. And so they have 2 choices. They can land in the water, die in 5 minutes, a la Titanic, or they can land on a glacier in Greenland. And I'll bet you know which one they decided to do. Well, the first plane lands on the glacier with its wheels down, hits the ice, and flips over. Now, any pilot will tell you that's a bad landing. The other 7 planes landed with their wheels up. They just belly landed on the ice. The planes, of course, were all damaged. It took 9 days for the crews to be rescued, but not a man was lost. But the planes were simply left there. It was far cheaper to just make new planes than to try to bring them back and repair them. Then 2 men in Kentucky in 1988 remembered that those planes were up there. Today, they're valuable. There is a lot of money in antique military aircraft because there's so few of them. The last time I knew of a German fighter plane, a Bf-106, it was $500,000 and it wasn't in good shape. There's a lot of money in these antique military aircraft. So they decided to go up there and get those planes and bring them back down. Good money-making adventure, correct? Now, it's only been 46 years since the plane landed. Let me explain. The planes landed. The planes do not sink into the ice. The planes land and they stay exactly where they landed. So tell me, evolutionists will tell you that these little lines in the ice represent a year, correct? It's been 46 years. Please, I'm going to have a little auction here. After all, this is Tennessee. We like to do auctions around here, don't we? So I'm going to take an auction. You please tell me, how much ice and snow did we find on top of the planes when they found them? It's only been 46 years, right? So how much ice and snow? Come on. Do I have an opening bid? Opening bid. None. So zero. Okay. So we have an opening bid of 0. Thank you, sir. Another bid? 200 feet. I don't think she agrees with you. And I must say, you are a very optimistic person. Do I have a third bid? Third bid, going once? Twice? Okay, well, I guess I'll close the bid with just 2. So we have 0 and 200. I'm sorry to say, my dear, you're low. You're low. You see, we actually found 250 feet of ice and snow on top of the planes in only 46 years. Now, first of all, I'd like you to think about this for a second. Let's just do a little math, if you don't mind. And this is a Lockheed P-38 Lightning fighter located 250 feet below the ice and snow. You see, when they went to find the planes, they could not find them. They knew where they were supposed to be, but they couldn't find them. They had to get ice-penetrating radar, find the planes. They found them 250 to 270 feet below the surface. They actually had to get equipment that would not bore a hole, but would melt a hole through the ice, that big, down to this plane. They melted out around her to take this picture. And this particular plane was in such good condition, they disassembled her, brought her up the hole, brought her back to Kentucky, reassembled her, and today she's flying. Today she's flying. Her nickname, as you might suspect, is Glacier Girl. I think she's really pretty, and I'll show you a picture of her to prove it. But let's think about this for a second. It took 46 years for 250 feet of ice and snow to build up on top of the planes. That's an average of 5.4 foot per year. That means that the 10,000 feet of ice and snow in the Antarctic could form in only about 2,000 years. It doesn't take millions of years. And again, I talked about blizzards and so forth. Some of you are familiar with snow, ice. I grew up with the Sierras of California, and we plowed out there. And I want you to think about something. You know, we didn't use ice, the salt and stuff like that, chemicals. We actually used plows. Tell me something. After a fresh snowfall, have you ever been driving along a road where they just plowed? And along the side of the road, did it look like that? It did, huh? Well, think with me. If you compress that, it looks just like the little lines in the ice cap. Now, I mentioned that she's flying today. That's what she looks like today. I think she's just gorgeous. One of the few flying P-38s in the world. Well, let's go on. How about, does radiometric dating prove that rocks are billions of years old? Now, if I use a word that I don't think you would know or might not be familiar with, I will always stop to define what the word means. What does this word radiometric mean? It is describing the supposed use of radioactive materials to supposedly measure how long it has been since a creature lived or an event occurred. All of you have heard of carbon-14, but there's also potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium, uranium, lead. There's many of these methods, but none of them work. But radiometric is the supposed use of the decay of radioactive materials to supposedly measure the amount of time since an event occurred or a creature lived. Now, none of them work. None of them work, because all of them start with 6 fatal false assumptions. Carbon-14 has 20. I have videos available on an hour on carbon-14, an hour on, again, potassium argon. If you're interested, we show you not only why they don't work, we show you examples of when they didn't work. Hello? And I'm going to show you 3 examples tonight. But none of them work. They all start with 6 fatal false assumptions. And everyone in this room, above that height, should be able to figure out why, at least one of them. Think with me. Today, we have very sophisticated technological equipment. We can tell you the exact ratio of isotopes in a sample today, no problem. But the problem is we don't know what the starting values were. Now, if you only know the end, you don't know the beginning, you cannot possibly get a reliable date, because it's your assumptions that you use that would get the date, and assumptions are, well, they're not valuable. Is that right? And then again, I want you to think about this. The flood of Noah would drastically change the carbon cycle on Earth, and that's going to throw off all carbon-14. As a matter of fact, carbon-14 is only good for one thing. The only thing that carbon-14 dating is valuable for is proving the Earth is young. Yeah, it drives them nuts. Carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years. In theory, it should only last about 250,000 years before you would not be able to measure it. We can only measure it to 17.5 half-lives. That's approximately 100,000 years. Theoretically, at 250,000, it would be 0. Okay? Here's the problem. We can't find a carbon deposit on Earth. We cannot find any oil, coal, carbonaceous clays that do not have significant, measurable carbon-14. Now that means that all the coal, oil, carbonaceous clays on Earth have to be less than 100,000 years old. And so when they say this oil is 100 million years old, it's simply not true. But what are they? These are the products of a worldwide flood. Now, let's think about something. If these things work, now I have stipulated they don't, okay? But if these things did actually work, if I could use 2 different ones on the same sample, shouldn't I get approximately the same age? Right? I mean, we're not asking for perfection here, and we'll allow for a little variation and so forth. But if these techniques worked, and we could use 2 different methods on the same rock, shouldn't we get approximately the same value, right? And again, we'll allow for a little variation. So what if they were, say, within 5% of the same value? We might say they worked. Is that correct? Apparently you don't agree. What about 10%? If they were within 10%, would you say they might appear to work? 3 people. Okay, apparently you want a bargain. How about 15%? If they were within 15% of each other, would you say, well, maybe they appear to work? I'm still getting a lot of resistance here. I guess you already figured this out, because the fact of the matter is we have great contradictions between 2 different methods used on the same rock. And again, I have many, many examples of this, but I'll just share 3 with you tonight for the time's sake. Number 1, let's go out to Sunset Crater National Monument. This is on the road leading up to the east end of the Grand Canyon. It's a beautiful little spot. I highly recommend stopping there if you're going to the Grand Canyon. And it's called Sunset Crater because the cinders at the top just glow at sunset. And this is a relatively small volcano. And we know that this volcano actually erupted approximately 900 years ago. It's not that difficult to figure out 900 years. And of course, as you know, there have been Native American Indians living there for the last 4,000 years. They came from the Tower of Babel. They've been in the Southwest for roughly 4,000 years. And we know that there were Native American Indians there when this eruption occurred because in the cinder cones and lava flows, we actually found Indian artifacts. So we know they were there when the volcano erupted, correct? Now, when you deal with volcanic materials, the method that you use supposedly to date the rock is the potassium argon method. So we took some samples, sent them away to a lab that specializes in potassium argon dating. Now we know that this material is roughly 900 years old, correct? But the lab came back and said, no, supposedly it was 210 to 230,000 years old. I don't know about you, but I see more than a 15% difference here. How about you? Number two, let's go to Australia. Now, this is a piece of volcanic rock with a piece of wood surrounded by the rock, and the heat of the lava has turned the wood into charcoal. So the heat of the lava surrounding the piece of dry wood caused the wood to convert to charcoal. And so since this is charcoal, well, of course, we can use the carbon-14 technique. And since this is volcanic rock surrounding it, we can use the potassium-argon method, correct? Now, I do not agree with these dates whatsoever, okay? But we sent samples of the charcoal to a lab that specializes in carbon-14 dating. We sent sample of the rock to the lab that specializes in potassium-argon. And again, I don't agree with these dates, but the lab that tested the charcoal came back with a date of 45,000 years old. I don't agree with that, but that's what they got, right? However, the lab that did the potassium-argon date on the rock came back with a date of 44 million years old. Anybody see a problem with that? And I think that's more than a 15% difference, don't you? Great. Just one more example. For this, we're going to go Hawaii. In 1801, on the Big Island, there was a volcanic eruption. Now, there's always volcanic eruptions going on the Big Island. There's one right now and so forth. However, in 1801, there was an eruption that was witnessed by people there. Obviously, they were there to document it, right? And, well, I show you this presentation after last night because how many of you were here last night and you saw the maps of the world with no water? Is that correct? Now, north of the equator in the Pacific Ocean, the northern Pacific Ocean, there are 20,000 underwater volcanoes. I asked you to remember that because if you remember those maps, it'll be easier to understand this. So in 1801, there was this eruption. Now, I also want you to know I'm not a proud or a boastful kind of guy, but I would like you to appreciate at least the difficulty in making some of these slides for your benefit. So, number one, here we see an illustration, and here you see underwater volcanoes here, and here's a volcano that sticks out of the water, correct? And that's going to represent our Hawaiian island, right? Now, if you watch carefully, in 1801, there was an eruption. Apparently, you missed it. The correct response was, ah. Ready? So, in 1801, there was an eruption. Now, this eruption was massive. You have to understand something. The volcanoes of Hawaii, they are not known for their massive explosive force. They are known for their massive lava flows. So they don't explode a whole lot, but they just flow out magma, unbelievable amounts. And so in this eruption in 1801, well, the lava flowed out of the top of the volcano, down the side of the volcano, into the ocean, all the way down the side of the volcano to the ocean floor, and 2.6 miles down. It is just one continuous flow, easily followed. There's no breaks. And we got this idea. Let's send a robot down that slope, take some samples of the lava, and let's just see what kind of a date we get. And again, this is volcanic material, so we supposedly use the potassium-argon method, correct? So we sent that robot down 0.8 of a mile, did a potassium-argon date, came back with a 0 million year old date. Now, I want you to understand that technically that is correct. Technically that is correct. Carbon-14 doesn't last very long, and you got to use it before it's gone. It's real fast decay. But potassium-argon has a very slow, millions of years type of decay, and so you can't use carbon-14 on a volcano, but you can't use potassium-argon on a piece of wood either. And so, well, if this material is, as we know, only, 222 years old, then 0 million is correct. You with me? We said, okay, well, let's send that robot down further. So we sent that robot down 2 miles. Took a sample, came back with a date of 12 million years old. For material that we know is 222 years old. We always said that's interesting. So let's send that robot all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, 2.6 miles down. We took a sample, came back and got a date of 21 million years old for material that we know is 222 years old. Do you get the idea these things don't work? And any knowledgeable evolutionist doesn't even bother to use them. They don't. They don't bother to use them. They do something else, but they don't use this supposedly scientific method because they know it doesn't work. And then, of course, let's talk about coal. I mentioned that earlier. Anybody here originally from northern Michigan? No, okay. This picture is from northern Michigan. I just thought if you were, I'd point that out. What you see here, you see a pure layer of anthracite coal here, 2-3 foot thick. Now, you only find coal, oil, natural gas between layers of sedimentary rock. Again, igneous, metamorphic, sedimentary, dried out mud, right? And you only find coal, oil, natural gas between layers of dried out mud. And you can see the layers of dried out mud below here and up here. Is that correct? Yes. Now, anybody who knows anything about coal formation will tell you it takes 10 foot of dead plant and wood material all in one place, all at one time, without decay, compressed down to 1 foot, a ratio of 10 to 1, to get anthracite coal. Anthracite coal is the hardest, densest, blackest, bestest coal there is. It's the good stuff. Now, if you only compress it 2 or 3 to 1, you're going to get brown lignites. You compress it 5 to 6 to 1, you're going to get medium-grade bituminous coals. But if you want to get anthracite, you've got to compress it 10 to 1. Now, here's the problem. You see, in our states of Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, we have layers of pure anthracite coal 200 and 300 foot thick. And we ought to be using it for useful purposes. Hello? And so let's think about this. 200, 300 foot. That would tell you that at some time in the past, there had to be a layer of dead plant and wood material all in one place, all at one time. Well, let's think. 200 feet would be, well, shucks. It had to be 2,000 foot thick, is that right? Yeah. Or 300 feet would be 3,000 foot thick. You'd have to have a layer of dead plant and wood material, 2,000, 3,000 foot thick, with enough mud on top of that to compress it down 10 to 1. And I would suggest to you that only a worldwide flood could do that. Hello? Amen. And you find the darndest things in coal. I mean that. You find the darndest things in coal. Now, I have a presentation out there, Dinomania. I show some other things that have been found in coal. Small black iron pot, for instance, other artifacts. But tonight, I just want to show you one. You see, we found this, this man-made bell. It was found in 1944 in medium-grade bituminous coal in the state of West Virginia, but the coal was supposed to be more than 300 million years old. Now, let's think about that for just a second. I would like you to take a good look at the bell. It's about the size of a, quote, dinner bell. But it is made out of a very unique alloy, basically unused in foundries today. And if you turn the bell 90 degrees and look inside the bell, the clapper inside is made out of iron. So the bell is a very unique alloy, and, the clapper is made out of iron. Now, if something is a fact, I will state it. If something is my opinion, my speculation, I will always label it that way. Are you with me? What is the fact about this bell? It was made by a human being between creation and the flood. It was trapped in vegetative material from the flood that turned to coal. That's a fact. Now, here's my speculation, and I'm not trying to sell you. I'm going to ask you to make up your own mind, okay? But I want you to take a good look at the top of the bell here. I'm going to show it to you magnified. It looks like that. Now, based upon what I see here, I believe that this bell was used in pagan worship before the flood. Now, this is just my opinion, my personal speculation. But I never make a speculation without good reason. Because you see, in India and at Babylon, we have found very similarly shaped bells. So I think I'm on good ground, but I can't prove it. You with me? You make up your own mind. Now, again, let's talk about fossils. Now, again, they say that it takes millions and millions of years to get a fossil, correct? Right? However, I would like to show you my third most favorite fossil. Now, my first and second most favorite fossil are in the Dinomania presentation, but I want to show you my third most favorite fossil. And you just wouldn't do that for anybody, so we're friends, right? You know, y'all need to work on your sincerity. I want to show you my third all-time favorite fossil. You just wouldn't do that for anybody, so we're friends, right? Right. That's a bit more convincing. Well, this is my third most favorite fossil of all times. This is the fossil of a fossil Teddybearosaurus. Now, this Teddybearosaurus fossilized in only 4 months. Would you like to see where we found it? Oh, that's good. I'm glad you did, because otherwise I'd have to change the program. This is where it was fossilized. This is called the Dripping or Dropping Well. It's in Yorkshire, England. That's the northeast corner of England, right against Scotland and the North Sea. And what we have up top there's a mineral spring, and water flows over the edge down to a river below here. And well, the mineral water flows over, and as it flows over the edge here, the water evaporates, leaving the stone waterfall, you might say. But the green color is algae growing in the water. Okay, so that's where the color comes from, it's just algae. But down along here at the bottom, you will notice they've hung a wire, and people come along and hang things on the wire, and then they come back 4 months later, and it's fossilized. And would you please count the number of teddy bears that are being fossilized at the time that this picture was taken. So let's start counting teddy bears. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. There are 23 teddy bears being fossilized at the time this photograph was being taken. And in addition to which, we have a bell, a woman's purse, a teapot, a hat, and another bell here. And if anybody can explain to me why, I would really appreciate it. I have never figured this one out. We also have a plastic lobster. Why would you want to fossilize a plastic lobster? I mean, isn't it stiff enough? Hello? So tell me, does it take millions of years to get a fossil? Now, not a chance. Remember, not a chance. However, if you are not convinced yet, let me show you the photograph of a man-made coil of rope from the Czech Republic. You see, here's the man-made rope. It says from the Czech Republic right there. But this coil of man-made rope fossilized in only 2 weeks. So please tell me, does it take millions of years to get a fossil? Not a chance. And lastly, I'm not going to call on anybody here, but lastly, I would like to ask you just to raise a hand and hold it up for a minute. How many of you like to fish? Fishermen, fisherwomen, up there? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, we now have, thank you very much, we now have 12 people who like to fish, and they are going to be our experts, okay? And again, I'm not going to call on you, but I'm just going to ask the 12 of you to take a look at this next photograph for me. Would you agree that is a fossil fish? Come on, experts? That's a fossil fish, right? I'm going to share with you, this is from Brazil, where I've done much mission work. This comes from Brazil, but the evolutionist who found this fossil fish was an honest evolutionist. And if an evolutionist is honest, then I think we need to applaud them. And I'm serious about that. You know, if an evolutionist makes an honest, bona fide scientific observation, they're right. And the evolutionist paleontologist who found this fossil fish in Brazil said, based upon the condition of the fossil, what was visible, that this fossil fish had fossilized in 5 hours or less. But it's better than that. You see, this comes from Brazil. It's in the Santana Formation of Brazil. We found fossil gills, fossil muscles, fossil stomachs. What the evolutionists who found it said was this: what is clear is that the fossilization process took place moments after the fish died and was completed within a few, probably less than 5 hours. However, in the report, this evolutionist continued to write, in this case, Instantaneous fossilization is suspected to have been the very cause of death. I'm sorry, did you just hear what I just said? Yeah. He just said this fish was DOA fossil. Okay. Tell me, if you can die from fossilization, is it a rapid or slow process? I think it must be rapid. How about you? If you come to understand what occurs in the fossilization process, you would realize it has to be fast. It cannot be slow, as evolutionists claim. Well, let's continue. I'm sure you've noticed the moon is moving away, correct? You haven't noticed the moon is moving away? Where are your powers of observation, folks? The moon is moving away at a staggeringly fast rate. Are you ready to be staggered? You are not at all convincing. Are you ready to be staggered?
Yes.
Well, the moon is moving away at a staggeringly fast rate. It is moving away from the Earth at 1.5 inches a year. Come on, aren't you staggered? Ooh, yeah. Hey, listen, maybe you don't understand, but you should be staggered, actually. And you do not have to believe me. You can prove this for yourself. You can do this on a laptop computer. I'm not so sure I couldn't find tablets that could do it. All you have to do is stick the formula for the law of gravity in a computer. Laptop's big enough. And again, if you don't have the formula, I'll give it to you. But you simply stick the formula for the law of gravity in a laptop computer, put the mass of the Earth, the mass of the moon, the average distance, which is 239,000 miles, and click Enter, and go back in time. Think with me. The moon is moving away at 1.5 inches per year. Now, I know that may sound ridiculously small, but it is measurable. Remember that we landed on the moon 6 times. We left mirrors there. We bounced lasers off of them. You can even calculate it using the law of gravity. But the moon is moving away at 1.5 inches per year now. But let's think about this. If you go back in time, you go back 1 year, it's 1.5 inches closer, right? 2 years, it's another 1.5 inches. Now it's 3 inches, right? But do you remember the law of gravity? Okay, it's an inverse square law. If you half the distance, you quadruple the force. And so what's going to happen? Well, as you start to come back 1.5 inches per year, well, suddenly you're going to start coming back at 1 foot a year. And then as they get closer, the force of gravity increasing, it'll come back at 1 mile a year. And if you put this in a laptop computer and just hit enter and go back in time, the moon would spiral into the Earth and hit the Earth only 1.4 billion years ago. But evolutionists say the Earth and moon are the same age, roughly 4.5 to 5 billion years old. Well, if that is true, then according to evolutionists, the moon was attached to the Earth for the first 3.6 billion years, and it has only been moving away for the last 1.4 billion. Is that correct? Oh, come on, you're not going to buy that, right? Come on, folks, if the moon was ever here, it'd still be here. Now, think with me for a second. If it's only 6,000 years old, it's only moved 750 feet, but if it were, if it were 1.4 billion years old, it'd be touching the Earth. I think I see a problem here. And there's another problem, too. There's something called the Roche, R-O-C-H-E, distance. That's the distance that the moon could be from the Earth and still have a moon, because if it gets closer than that, now that distance is roughly 11,500 miles, but if the moon were ever that close, the moon would be broken up into pieces and we would have a ring and not a moon. The sheer fact that you can see the moon is proof that it's all young. As a matter of fact, there are 10 scientific reasons to prove, based on finding various radioactive materials and other reasons. For example, the moon is still warm on the inside, but if it were 4.5 billion years old, it should be stone cold. But it's still warm on the inside. That proves it's young. There's lots of things, okay? Well, let's think about this. If the moon were to come back towards the Earth, as we go back in time, what would that constitute a problem? Well, let's think about this. The single biggest factor in tides, now here up in Tennessee, we don't think much about tides, but I live in Florida. We think a whole lot about tides. I live on one of the highest pieces of land in eastern Orlando, and we're only 115 feet above sea level. So we kind of think about tides. Hello? But let's think, as the moon comes back towards the earth, what's going to happen? Well, the tides are going to get bigger and bigger. So if the moon comes back, the tides are going to get bigger and bigger, correct? Well, again, you don't need me. You can do this for yourself. You don't have to believe me at all. Put these things in a computer, allow the moon to come back towards the earth, and the tide would rise 1 mile high twice a day only a half a billion years ago. Now, tell me, just what altitude are we here at Gordonsville? 600. Thank you, sir. I meant to check it. I didn't, but I think that's a good number. I think it's a good number, but I wasn't sure. So you're 600 feet above sea level, but the tide would rise 1 mile high twice a day if you only go back a half a billion years. Which then begs the question, do you know how to breathe underwater? Excuse me? Oh. And then we're going to end here, but I want to talk with you about the tides again. The tides is a great proof for a young Earth. For example, I'm sure many of you are familiar with a place called England, where many of our ancestors came from, right? Now, you've heard about the White Cliffs of Dover, correct? And the White Cliffs of Dover, maybe you've seen pictures of them. I've been there, I've touched them and so forth. It's interesting. You hit them with a flat hand, and you come away with sparkly little stuff stuck to your hand. It's fossils. Those are individual cells, the kind of individual cells that live in the ocean. Fossilized, that's what the chalk is, that's the chalk deposits. And they're wet because they're always, spray and stuff. But the ocean tides are eroding England. The White Cliffs stay white because as they're eroded at the bottom, the topper part is dirty, it falls and exposes new white, so they kind of self-cleaning. Hello? Well, here's the problem. The rate at which they are eroding would mean that if you only took a half a billion years, then they would have eroded the same distance as from Tokyo to London. Maybe you don't understand. England's not that wide. If England were as old as they claim, there would be no England. Hello? Well, with that in mind, does starlight take billions of years to get here from distant stars, distant galaxies? This is our last one for tonight. Again, it's a Monday night. But let's take a look at this, because I know many, many of you want to have an answer to this. And I would also point out we have a very good free article on our website about this as well. How many of you were taught that the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second at this time, is a constant? Didn't the evolutionists say it's a constant, right? And then they said, and because it's a constant, these stars, which are billions and billions of light years away, must be billions and billions of years old. That's the line, right? First of all, the speed of light is not a constant. It is not a constant. And simply because something is, 13.82 billion light years away does not mean it's 13.82 billion years old. And there are many, many factors here. I can only describe a couple of them tonight, and I wouldn't want to get too technical about it either. But the speed of light is not a true constant. As a matter of fact, the speed of light is not a constant. Light has been slowing down over time, and I will show you. There have been recent experiments in which evolutionists claim they've even stopped it and started it again. Hello? Anybody know when we first accurately measured the speed of light? Hazard a guess? How long ago was it? We have accurately measured the speed of light, but the question is, of course, at that time. But anybody know how long it's been? No? Well, many people would say about 100. They go back to the Michelson experiments on the speed of light, and they would say 100, 125. I mean, that's a pretty common answer. It's true. However, no, we've known it since 100 years before the American Revolution. 1676. A Danish astronomer named Olaf Romer in 1676 accurately measured the speed of light. And it really wasn't that difficult. It was agreed, interesting, and he was pretty smart to figure it out, but it really wasn't that difficult. But we've known the speed of light since 1676, roughly 350 years. And because we've measured it over that period of time, if you measure it using physical measurements, the speed of light is continuously slowing down. If you know anything about the second law of thermodynamics, it's the law of universal decay. It applies to all physical, biological systems. Everything is breaking down. Well, why wouldn't that apply to light? And so, since God created the universe, light has been slowing down. And here, these are just citations here from the article that's on our website. And again, there is a team of evolutionary believing astrophysicists and astronomers. And in the year 2009, they say they stopped light for 1.5 seconds and started it again. Now, I know when I say 1.5 seconds, you're going to say, so what? But tell me, haven't they really accomplished something near miraculous? Because in 1.5 seconds at the speed of light, you can go around the equator of the Earth 10 times. Hello? So if you can stop it for 1.5 seconds and then release it again, you have accomplished something significant. You with me? And I would like to introduce you here, Dr. Vladimir Sergeyevich Trotsky. He's a radio astronomer in Nizhny Novgorod, Russia. That's my headquarters when I'm able to be in Russia. It's 320 miles due east out of Moscow on the banks of the Volga River. It's an ancient town with its own Kremlin, major universities. My daughter graduated there, 3 years of attendance. And, well, he is not a creationist. But based on data, real data, he says based upon the data that he has been able to collect, that in his opinion, the speed of light was at one time 10 million times faster than today. Well, you could get across the entire universe in less than 6,000 years at that speed. But I also want to point out to you, maybe you remember the great Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein said, and to this day, scientists agree, you can only measure the speed of light in one direction. And so think with me. The fact of the matter is that light may be leaving us instantaneous speed, but only bouncing and coming back at 186,000 miles per second at this time. But you cannot use an atomic clock to do that. You have to use a physical measurement, because atomic clocks are based upon the speed of light. So if light's slowing down, you wouldn't be able to measure it with an atomic clock. You have to make physical measurements. But we've been seeing it slow down for 350 years. And again, that proves the universe is young. There are many other things on how you can get redshift without expansion. And I don't want to detail all that, but we do have an article on our website you can read for free on that. But the speed of light is not a true constant. There are very few true constants. G, gravity, alpha, the fine particle constant. But there's very few true constants in nature. The ones we do know are very important. But the fact of the matter is, don't let them tell you that it is a constant speed, and therefore because something is 13.82 billion light years away. See, remember, a light year is not a time. A light year is a distance. It's the distance that light travels in 1 year at the current speed of light as measured on Earth today, roughly 5.8 trillion miles. However, if the speed of light were to be faster or slower, it would change the distance, correct? And light being faster in the past would change the yardstick. Are you with me? Think with me for a moment. We have never been outside of the solar system to measure the speed of light. We can only measure it here. And if you take a look at the Pioneer anomaly, which is going on right now, it may well be proof that the speed of light does vary. As a matter of fact, we have found out that gravity affects the speed of light, and there's a whole lot of other things. But the fact of the matter is we do not have to back down to evolutionary time. We don't have to accept millions and billions of years at all because it's unscientific, as long as it also is unscriptural, correct? So we don't have to bow the knee on this at all. We have plenty of proof. It is scientifically young, as the Bible says. So the Bible doesn't need science to prove it's true, but science does prove that the Bible's true if you look at real science. Can I get an amen?
Amen.